Thomas Kissinger, great to be with you. I want to ask a very important question. If God could save everyone, would He? I want to read from this little booklet of Dr. Stephen Jones as we entertain this all-important question. As far as everyone being saved in the end through the Lord Jesus Christ and everything being reconciled back to the Father through the blood of His cross, if this does not take place, it only leaves us with two conclusions. Either God is not able to do this, or God is not willing to do this. So it would be an indictment against either His power or His love. So let's jump right on into this and read about this all-important question. What is God's will? The belief that God cannot do some things or that God is limited in His ability is fairly common among Christians. Many think that God's ability to act is limited by man's free will. People often think that God either cannot override man's will or that He is incapable of making man change his will to conform to the will of God. But God would not be God at all if He were so helpless in the face of billions of people, each restricting God in His own way by His free will. The collective restriction would be rather enormous, for each man has jurisdiction over his own piece of the earth, even if it is just his own body. Is God a mere bystander in human history? Is God merely a good counselor to men? Does God wish that men would follow Him, but can do little or nothing about it? Is this how we are to define the meaning of God? Some years ago, some religious philosophers came to the conclusion that God is dead. What they meant was that God created all things and then left it all to fend for itself, to evolve into whatever men might make it. The bottom line is that they believed that God was indifferent and no longer concerned Himself with human history. This kind of thinking was a natural outgrowth of the idea that God was helpless to do anything in the face of man's free will. But which is worse, to make God helpless or to make Him indifferent? Those of us who have a more personal relationship with Jesus Christ and who see His hand in our lives every day do not subscribe to the idea of God's helplessness nor His indifference. The very fact that He sent Jesus Christ to die for the sin of the world shows how intensely interested He is in man. He is anything but indifferent. The Bible also gives many examples to show that God is anything but helpless. He constantly takes the credit for the overthrow of whole nations as well as the positive events, such as the redemption of Israel from Egypt. Isaiah 45 is the great sovereignty chapter in the Old Testament. God says that even a pagan king like Cyrus the Persian would do everything that God tells him to do. In Romans 9, Paul says that God raised up His own opposition in the person of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to show us that He was sovereign. With the sovereignty of God in mind, then, what is it that prevents God from saving all mankind? Is He really under a self-imposed restriction that limits His ability to save all men? If so, by what law? What law makes it imperative for God to allow His children to use their free will to destroy themselves? Must I follow such a practice with my own children? Must I stand in the driveway and merely coax my child into leaving the street when a car approaches? Why do we think it is a moral imperative that God must do this with His children? If God really is God and is all-powerful, all-wise, and all-knowing as He claims to be, then how is it that He should lose the vast majority of humanity to the wiles of the devil or man's wicked but free will? Is God really the loser in this cosmic battle between good and evil, light and darkness? When we come to the end of history, will God prove to be the sore loser by torturing all those who dared to defeat him? And these are the questions that we need to be asking. And the answers are in the scriptures. And we can find them by studying to show ourselves approved unto God, and by calling on his name for the spirit of wisdom and revelation in the knowledge of him. But I want to assure you that God is all powerful, God is all loving, and God has a plan through the Lord Jesus Christ to save all mankind and to reconcile all things to himself through the precious blood of his cross. This is part 1 of this series, and we're going to be getting more into this great question: if God could save everyone, would he?